Yes. Oh, and there is no mic, please.
Oh, of course, please, yes. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very glad that we are here together and that we can start our conference on internet and social media as tools of freedom. I'm very honored to organize this conference in European Parliament. Also as a Polish member of Parliament, because for us in Poland, especially when I was young, when I was studying, Europe, I mean, at that time European communities, there was no European Union, but Europe was not only the institution, I mean, economic institution, but first of all, the institution based on values. And we strongly believed in Poland at the time during, let's say, solidarity times between 80 and 89, that we have to join Western world, European communities, because of sharing the same values. And definitely European Parliament is, in my opinion, this place where we can be and we can not compromise. We can not compromise on values, and that is something extremely important for me. I'm very honored to organize this conference with my colleague from Sweden, from Pirates Party, from the Greens, Amelia Andersdotter. We cooperated together closely in INTA committee, and it was very strange because as usually EPP, my party, has not very things in common with Greens in International Trade Committee, but there was dossier where our opinions were very in common. It was ACTA. I'm very happy that we could together stand on values, stand on freedom in internet, and that we could bring something to oppose ACTA in this House. I would like to say that it's extremely important, and we are, I mean, all Europeans are very honored to have together with us Madam Lina Mhenni, who was nominated to co-nominated to Nobel Prize and is known very well as a Tunisian girl. We do remember that so-called Arab Spring began in Tunisia, and you participated in this process, and you are still active, and you are not compromising on important for all of us values in your country, and we are very thankful to you for your role in this process, and we could, I have to say, we could learn a lot from you and from your colleagues. Then I would like to turn to my left and welcome Mr. Gürkan Özturan, who is a Turkish blogger, and as some time ago all of our eyes watched TVs looking for information from Tunisia, today we are very much alarmed about what is going on in Turkey. I don't want to compare Tunisia of Ben Ali with today's Turkey. I don't want to do it. But definitely what is in common is that in Turkey we see people who are non-compromising on democracy and freedom, who want to have their opinions to be heard and respected. And definitely we observe oppression against them with rising concern and rising opposition. When quite recently I've watched TV and I saw this standing protest, I wanted to say that that is a symbol for me, for those who fight for values, for democracy, for freedom, against those who blame them as hooligans, as those who are almost terrorists. And I have to say that all of my hearts are with those who fight for right of expression and right of having a say in your country. Then I would like to present our guests from Poland, and they are very special. Because as you remember, this time when we all discussed ACTA on political saloons, of political halls and political houses like the European Parliament, there were those on the streets who actively protested, fighting for freedom in internet. And all of these things started in Poland, and those who expressed in the best way, very professional, very convincing, their rights were the persons who are just together with us, Madam Katarzyna Szymielewicz and Mr. Jarosław Lipszyc. And by the way, I owed them very much, because they were the persons who convinced me in the rights they were fighting for. And due to their argumentation, due to their very strong conviction, I decided to take their part and support them. I'm very happy also to welcome those who watch this discussion on webstream. It's very important for us that we are not only just around this room present, but also there are a lot of people watching us and watching the discussion via internet, and that is what internet is for. Before I give the floor and ask Madam Andersdotter to co-moderate this panel, I would like to say some things, some ideas. First, that for some societies, internet is extremely important as a tool to create valid and active and vital civil society in the conditions, maybe not of full democracy, but also in the conditions of, let's put it this way, of political competition. And I would like to refer to my personal experience of cooperation with Ukrainian civil society. And I would like just to show this particular group as a model for these countries where we have political competition, but we have no full-fledged democracy. In many ways, people are not represented by politicians. Politics is highly corrupted, and people who want to do something for their compatriots search for the right way to do it. And of course they are fed up with political parties many times, but they can find the area, the way to express their opinions, but also to fight for their beliefs, just in internet. And there are many internet groups also calling for European integration, like Europeans. But there is also a group named Maidan, after the square in Kiev where the protests of Orange Revolution started. And these are the people who are just followers, and they are just descendants of these revolution heroes. And their activities show very well how it is possible to use internet in the right way. Second issue is that internet is just an instrument, it's just a tool. It can be a tool for freedom, but also it can be a tool for something wrong, for something bad, sometimes for crime. And today we hear about different programs to intelligence internet, to follow the internet, to search the internet. We hear about PRISM, for example. And I would like to say that I'm strongly convinced that understanding the threats, understanding the problems, and sometimes crimes, which which could use internet as a tool, we must not give up our freedoms, and we must not allow different institutions who, even in goodwill, I don't discuss it, want to control internet, not to control. Control is for, internet is for everybody. Internet is a tool for freedom. Internet is a tool for us, and definitely, if somebody wants to check what is going on, what is being done in internet, it must be not in the way of intelligence, it must be not in the way which limit our freedoms. That is something very important in today's world. We must not forget about it, and we must also present this message to those who want to control. So I think that it is the most important issue, the most important question, because when we start to control internet, when we start to intelligence internet, we start to intelligence society, we start to limit society, and this is something we do not agree with. Amelia, if I can ask you for moderating this first part of our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this warm introduction and these very wise words in this time. So we will be starting the discussion with the perspective of two jurisdictions close to Europe where internet and social media have played a large role in the coordination of revolutionary movements. And so I would like to first ask Ms. Mhenni to give us an introduction to her activities in Tunisia during the revolution, and perhaps also what role the internet continues to play in the building of the Tunisian society after the revolution.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to take part in this very important discussion. Thank you for being present to listen to me. Well, I'll start by saying that I'm a blogger, I'm a cyber activist, but I think that the role of internet, Facebook, social media in general have been exaggerated. I will summarize the role of internet in informing people and mobilizing them. But let me say that the most important job was made on the ground. I think that people who faced the live ammunition, people who faced the violence of the police played the most important role in the revolution. But under the regime of Ben Ali, the traditional media, and by the traditional media I mean television, radio, newspapers, were monopolized by the regime. Journalists couldn't move freely to report what was going on in Tunisia. If they dared to do so, they were jailed, or the newspapers were censored. On internet also, we suffered censorship, but we had our ways to circumvent this censorship. So when Mohammed Bouazizi set his body on fire, and we heard about this on Facebook, we decided to show this to the whole world. It wasn't the first time that a Tunisian young man did do a horrible action like this. So we decided to talk about this to inform people in Tunisia and people all around the world. So, and the colleagues or those who work with Mohammed Bouazizi started to demonstrate. So we reported the demonstrations and what was happening. And this is how people know about the situation in Tunisia. But on the second stage, we used mainly social media to mobilize people. Many of the demonstrations organized in different parts of the country were organized thanks to Facebook events and thanks to spreading the information on Twitter. But let me say that in Tunisia people use Facebook more than they use Twitter. So foreign journalists couldn't access the country neither. So bloggers, cyber activists were informing them about what was going on. But one of my other roles, one of the roles I played was playing the reporters for foreign traditional media and mainly news channels. As I said, the journalists couldn't come to Tunisia to cover what was going on. So using Skype, for example, I used to inform people about what was going on the screens of many international news channels. So let me say that Ben Ali left the country. We succeeded in ousting them, but today whenever I am traveling I hear people talking about the success of the Tunisian revolution, but many Tunisians don't agree with this. Actually, it's true that Ben Ali is gone, but the whole system is still in place. So I think that now internet has still have a big role to play. Indeed, after the departure of Ben Ali, many people understood the power of internet, of social media. So, and I agree with you when you said that politics is highly corrupted. So many political parties, many political leaders understood the power of internet for spreading information and also for spreading their political propaganda. So they appointed unemployed young people to work for them, to spread their propaganda and to organize and launch defamation campaigns against their dissidents. So today I don't think that internet in Tunisia is playing the appropriate role. I don't think that it is still a tool for freedom. It is mainly used for doing bad things. The old bloggers with whom I used to fight against the regime of Ben Ali are still trying to do the same thing, but as I said, today we have many young people working for political parties and mainly for the government, and who work all the time. They are paid to do this, and so they have time and money to do this, which is not our case. We have our jobs, and we used to blog and use internet because we longed for freedom, for dignity. So the situation is very bad. We cannot resist face to their propaganda, face to their verbal violence, face to the defamation campaign they are organized against. They are organizing against any person daring to criticize the situation in Tunisia now. Let me say that under the regime of Ben Ali, we experienced censorship. Today we can say whatever we want on internet, but we risk prison. They let us say whatever we want, but later on we have a big price to pay for it. I'll give some concrete examples. For example, last week we had to be present in the trial of a rap singer who dared to criticize and even to insult the policeman in a song that he shared on internet. So he didn't record a CD, but he just shared a video clip on the internet. So he had been condemned to 2 years in jail just for a song. So I don't think that now internet is used for freedom of speech anymore. And let me say that when we attended the trial, after the trial, we have been beaten by the police, and they mainly targeted the journalists and bloggers. 3 of us have been beaten severely, 2 journalists and myself. So they are targeting us because we keep on criticizing the regime, we keep on criticizing the situation in Tunisia. I'll talk about another case. It's the case of Ayoub Masoudi, who used to be the advisor of the president of Tunisia, Monsef Marzouki. On his Facebook page, he talked about the army, and he has condemned to 1 year in jail, and he had many charges. He faced many charges. I'll talk also about Amina, the female activist. She shared her photos on Facebook. She didn't take off her clothes on the street. It was mainly on Facebook, and now she is in jail. And every week there are trials against journalists and bloggers. So let me say that today internet is not as efficient as it used to be. Today, it is mainly used by political parties and mainly by the party in power, and I'm talking about the Islamist party, and let me say it, that has nothing to do with moderation. For me, it's an extremist party, even if they are trying to spread the idea that it is a moderate one, that they changed their ways of thinking. No, today in Tunisia we are facing a new dictatorship based on religion, and unfortunately internet is used to spread this wrong idea about Tunisia. We are not in the process of building a democracy, but there is a big regression on all the plans, and the situation is very bad. 2 days ago I took part in a conference about freedom online, and there were many activists from all over the world, and we talked about the situation in Tunisia. We talked about the huge numbers of journalists and bloggers jailed because they are daring to criticize the regime in Tunisia on internet. So I don't know how we are going to face this, but today we are still fighting for our freedom, for freedom of speech in Tunisia. We are using internet, this is true, but we are demonstrating on the ground too. We are using internet again to mobilize people and to try to inform people. But what is happening is that internet alone is not sufficient. We need the traditional media. During the events, and by events I mean the revolution, TVs and radios used to take the information and to share it again. But today they are not doing this. They are forgetting about Tunisia. We had the assassination of Shukri Belaid. They talked about this for a few days and then they forgot about it. We had so many problems. Now we are facing problems of terrorism and in the Mount Shaambi, and we are trying to talk about it. We are trying to spread the information, but again, traditional media is not really caring about what's going on in Tunisia. And I'm not only talking about the media, but I'm talking about foreign countries in general. During the events in December 2010, January 2011, all the people were following what was happening in Tunisia. But today we are trying to say to them that there are so many things going on in Tunisia. Please try to follow what's happening. The revolution is not successful yet. I think that the revolution is still going on, and we are still fighting, and we need your help. We need your attention today.
So I think this is been a very interesting presentation, because when we talk about Tunisia, perhaps in Europe, we think about social media as that which allowed us to know what was happening in Tunisia more than as a tool used in Tunisia for Tunisians and for the Tunisian freedom of speech. And so another society where currently we're getting a lot of information about unsettlements in public environments and people actually being on the streets and protesting the influence of their government against the democratic systems and against freedom of speech is Turkey. And we have with us Gürkan, who's from Istanbul and has been protesting in Turkey for his right to express an opinion. And you're also regularly blogging now during the events. And we're looking very much forward to hearing your perspectives on the ongoing situation in Turkey and how you relate to that and the internet.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here, and it's very important to see international community's support behind people who are looking for further democracy and basic freedoms that they have in their communities. So I would like to first give a little background on what has been happening with the media freedom in Turkey, mainly because I used to be a journalist professionally as an editor. Then I had to give a break and later on continued with citizen journalism. Turkish media has always been one of a kind, with either absolute leaning towards political authority or simply benefiting from political support of the authority. Turkey is listed as 154th in Freedom of Press Index of Reporters Without Borders. Committee to Protect Journalists refers to Turkey as world's biggest prison of journalists, with half of the journalists imprisoned in the world being in Turkey. Concerning the international organizations' criticisms on Turkish media's freedom level, our government defends the case from a very security-focused perspective, stating that most of the journalists that are detained or arrested or imprisoned are kept under pressure because of terrorist activities. However, this again opens up another debate on what counts as terrorism, or if you can do it by simply writing your opinion. Media in general, mainstream media, has always been very government-focused in their reporting. Whenever there is any kind of crisis, media tends to take the side of the government and reflect events from a very governmental perspective. In the recent years, whenever there has been a crisis, the journalists kept silent in the first place and waited for an explanation of the government and then reported the events from there. Especially a few years ago when there was a PKK attack in Turkey, and there was full media coverage of it. Prime Minister actually invited chief editors of all media, mainstream media organs, and asked them kindly to not report on these events, or they would be actually promoting the terrorist activities in Turkey. One major problem of media-government relations has always also been on the media bosses, and they are also very active in other economic sectors. Most of the media bosses have investments in energy, finance, and construction, and many other fields of economy. And because of these investments, they tend to rely on government's plans and support. In order not to draw attention, they continue to support government's plans and hope to see further support from government organizations in their investments in other sectors. Another problem is that most of the mainstream media is currently being owned by government-leaning or government-linked people. Either this can be relatives or friends or simple partners in business. There has always been a certain level of alternative media in Turkey, but this has never managed to put a place in mainstream, mainly because their ad revenues were never enough to cover their costs. Only these kind of journalists have only been able to sustain themselves for a short period of time, or with a very short, with a very focused group of influence. Mainly, international media has been very dominant in Turkish society that has access to it. Especially the case of Uludere, that Turkish jets air raided on villagers and 34 people were killed in an airstrike. This news came into attention from international news sources. And this all happened when Turkish media kept absolute silence of it. So this actually could be counted as the first political reaction en masse on social media from Turkish society. Until then, there had never been a major case where millions of people would tweet about it or write posts about it or post so many photos or videos about it. A few years ago from today, I was talking to David Meerman Scott on how can these uprisings and protests through social media could happen elsewhere, all around the world, but not in Turkey. And he had told me that people need to be triggered and see this as a last resort. And seeing this Uludere, in this case, people saw the Turkish media silence and focusing on the international media, tried to push Turkish media into covering the events, which later on came to happen. Another interesting fact about social media use in Turkey was the one earthquake in the very east of Turkey. That people showed absolute solidarity and used social media to interconnect with each other to organize help for victims of an earthquake. Later on came about another meeting of Prime Minister with chief editors, again asking for less coverage about the events of terrorist activities in Turkey. And this went so far as to ask newspapers to fire several columnists or keep them under control. And even some TV reporters, some of whom are also my friends, have been released from their jobs and lost their voice in the screen. Turkey has also experienced a call by the Prime Minister to boycott mainstream media that has opposition voices in it. Then I would like to also draw attention to the financement of media, which relies on advertisement, and about the alcohol restrictions in Turkey. Alcohol advertisements in Turkey make 35% of ad revenue for non-governmental or non-conservative media that could have opposition voices available. So with the alcohol restrictions, although many people feel that their private lives are being under influence of the government, there is also another aspect, that is media is losing a great ad revenue, and they also have to let many journalists go and look for another job. Then I would like to mention another thing that happened last month. The biggest terrorist attacks against Turkey in Reyhanli on the border of Syria. These attacks came at a time when Turkish society was in a very tense situation, and after these attacks, when over 50 people were killed, people started protests, which mainly focused on anti-governmental voices. With the protests turning anti-government, there came a broadcast ban on the events. The national media went silent. People started to boom their reaction on the internet again. These were the beginnings of the last few weeks that we have been seeing in Turkey. So then there came the Gezi Park involvement. It started as a very simple, peaceful civilian protest. Several dozen people, mainly young people, they wanted to preserve their park and protect it. The way they did was to simply go occupy the park by sitting in the park and reading books while there was police presence, and they started reading books to the police's faces. Actually, we can change the slides a little. That is the Çapulcu penguin that you see over there. Oh. You have to press F5. This is a few days later, so I would actually turn back to this, that all national media actually had the same headline. That is how free they are. Next one, please. And this is the Turkish televisions not reporting the Gezi Park events. And next one. This is how the peaceful protest started, how it was until the police arrived. And when the police arrived, actually, they were still like this. And one morning, there came a down operation against people who were staying in the park with their tents. Hundreds of them were dispersed. which actually was supposed to be shown on national media, but none of the televisions showed anything about it. Rather than that, they kept showing regular programs. The excessive use of force was for the first time being proven by regular people who were recording from the scene, or who were actually broadcasting from the scene via Ustream and other streaming devices or platforms. Next, please. This is the other day. The girl in red by now has international recognition. This is when people decided to occupy the park. And while they were simply there, the excessive use of force met lots of gas and batons and beating and so on. This just triggered nerves of the Turkish society. While they were passive-aggressive, they were never protesting before at such a large scale. People got angry about this because this time it was absolutely peaceful and there was no other intention than just saving the last green space of the heart of the city. Next, please. This is what happened on the first day when the police raided at 5 a.m. and set fire on the tents of the protesters. Thousands of people started marching in towards Taksim Square and towards the Gezi Park. This was the scene of the fire, and protesters were showing this live on the internet, and this image got stuck in our heads. And this was the view afterwards. This is in the middle of the park, where there used to be people protesting peacefully, reading books, reading poetry, playing music, and waiting for the police to retreat. And actually, government declared that the park is under protection and that all would end. It was still possible at this point that the people would stop the protests if the park would just be preserved. Then, when the second down operation came and thousands of people were violently taken off the park and the police occupied it, this time the protest spread to a much larger society and drew attention from many other different people. So there immediately began a campaign online, mainly thanks to the digital agencies, that started a creative support for Gezi Park movement. And they started bringing up these posters and these images that are promoting the Gezi Park. And it says, Diren Gezi Park, resist Gezi Park. They basically wanted to spread the word and tell the whole national community that they should be actually protecting their green spaces, because this does not only happen in Turkey, this does not happen only in Istanbul, it's in every city, every town, every little village, that the green spaces are being destroyed for modern buildings that could have been constructed in elsewhere. While all this happened, I guess we lost track of it now. While all this happened, national media was still showing penguin documentaries. And because of that, people got furious. The people on the street, the ones who were trying to preserve their park, they got furious because thousands of people were being gassed, they were getting beaten, they were getting shot by gas canisters, they were getting almost run over by police panzers and water cannons. And not seeing this being talked about in media just got them furious. And actually, there is supposed to be one slide that shows when the people decided to join in with the protesters. It is only 10% of the original protesters who decided to join in when they heard that the park was being demolished, but more than 50% of them went to the park to protest the police violence and the violent crackdown on civilian citizens who were protesting peacefully, unarmed, and unprotected. Then, days later, the national media decided to broadcast on the events, but with a severe government bias. Whatever you saw on the national media, it had psychological undertones to convince people that protesters began a violent protest to provoke the police to act in that manner. And when you show the images in a reverse mode, that when originally it was police attacking protesters, protesters trying to run away, then when they are stuck in a corner, they start defending themselves by throwing whatever they catch in their hand, mostly gas canisters that were shot on them. When you show this in a reverse angle, it seems like the protesters throw gas canisters to police, then they start marching towards the police, and the police retreats slowly, and police is trying to defend itself by shooting gas canisters to the people. This is how the media reflected the events in Turkey. Apart from that, there were many speeches given by the Prime Minister while all the world was calling for restraint in Turkey and the Turkish government and officials to respect human rights and all the basic freedoms of the society. This did not come. When especially, okay, then there is another figure. Starting with the first day of the Diren Gezi Park movement, there were 2 million tweets daily, 1 million hit the streets on the first day, and thousands marched to Taksim because there was a blockade on transportation. All the streets were emptied by public transport. It was not available, so people kept walking to Taksim. And people used very excessive intellectual boom against the state's crackdown by making a caricature of it. Then Red Hack and Anonymous decided to take down media websites. They started a joint operation against Turkish media called Op Turkey. And this is the scene from CNN International and CNN Türk. While CNN International was broadcasting live from the events in Taksim, from the 20-hour clashes between protesters and the police forces, CNN Türk, being in the heart of Istanbul, decided to broadcast penguin documentaries, which was very important, I suppose. This is the first moment of the uprisings after the initial crackdown in Istanbul. The violent attacks by the police that started with the 20-hour clashes. This is where it turned violent nationally. And this is the tweet density of the protests on the first days. I'm sorry that these are all very old by now, as it is reaching its 20th day. But it shows the density. And when the police finally retreated from the park and the protesters secured the area by themselves, this is how the protests turned into. There were classical music concerts, there were philharmonic orchestra concerts, there were ballet shows, there were theatrical plays, there were any kind of artistic protest that they could use. And they continued to protest, they continued to produce culture in that atmosphere. And this bus stop nearby Taksim Square, it is referred to by the government as vandalized by protesters. I leave it to your opinion. Another dancing protest event from the park, and people had to wear their gas masks almost at all times because randomly or in an unannounced way, there were always gas being shot over them, and especially when helicopters were shooting gas from the air. The protesters organized a Çapulcu Kütüphane, a Çapulcu library, and this was available to anyone and everyone who wanted to bring in books or take some books from there. Another one, please. And they also used the work machines that were captured by the protesters while the work machines tried to destroy the park. And with the broken pieces that fell around, they planted trees, flowers, and any kind of green herbs that was available to them, just to show that they were against concrete, making the green spaces into concrete. Some people like to think that it was a very unified solidarity of anti-conservative people in the park. The government especially declared that the people in the park were against any kind of Muslim ideology or conservative ideology, but it is not true, because the revolutionary Muslims, the democratic Muslims, the anti-capitalist Muslims were there with the people. Next one. And another next one. Continue. Then Prime Minister Erdogan said, because the protesters were organizing themselves through social media, he said social media is evil, and it is the evil of all societies because it is full of immorality and it is misleading. And he was also angry at the mainstream media too, because they started to show images from the scene, although the protesters did not care about it anymore. Well, this is the resistant penguin. Then there started clashes again with the police, and the police started attacking on a daily basis until Mr. Stefan Füle came to Istanbul. So these are the heavy gas raids from Istanbul streets. And it's finally had international coverage with all its brutality from Turkey, while the Turkish national media still kept on relying on government's definition of the protesters as terrorists. Next one. While million people tried to march to Taksim Square, all the police forces were drawn into the park and around it in order to keep people from entering the park, because their using the park would count as a terrorist activity. Another image of violence. Next one. And some people also thought that there were no LGBT communities in Turkey, but there are, and they are there. So we got used to it. Next one. And next one. The people installed human chains in order to keep the police out, but it did not prevent another attack from the police forces. There were every kind of celebrations in the park and around it. And there were many, as I said, intellectual boom in the society. The creativity just could not be stopped, and any kind of image was turned into favor of protesters. And it also created a national unity of every part of the society, while also some policemen were against violence. And during these events, 6 policemen also committed suicide after not being able to handle the pressure. CNN International sent actually their war reporters to Taksim Square because their regular reporter actually fainted on live broadcast. And BBC's Turkish partner, NTV, they love to censor the background image by erasing the name of the Prime Minister, while BBC wrote it openly. And millions filled Taksim Square when it was peaceful, when the police retreated from there. And some people in social media with more than 10,000 followers, they started receiving these emails suddenly when Prime Minister declared that social media is evil and should not be used for protests. This email basically explains some social media accounts will be bought for lots of money. If they are willing to sell, they should contact these people, but they will not say what intention the buyer has. Next one. This is the profile from Twitter, and our Prime Minister, although he is followed by almost 3 million people, he is not following anyone, which gives out a clear image that he is not there to listen.
Really?
Then there is another caricature from the international media, as this cannot come in the national one. Next one. Yes, this is what I talked about earlier, that 50% of the protesters came to protest the police violence, and they did not want any further interference in their daily lives or liberties. Next one. And social media got mobilized again. It was used very effectively, and it was great solidarity and interconnectedness that resulted in a wonderful atmosphere of resistance against police violence in a very peaceful, civil manner. Next one. So last Friday, Prime Minister said, "Go fetch your kids, mothers, as in the park we cannot guarantee anyone's lives anymore," and see what happened next. Next one. Mothers came with their stones. And then the next one, they formed a human chain around the policemen to stop them from attacking their kids. And they threatened the police, saying, "If you touch my son, you will see the consequences." This is the mothers again. Next one. So, in final words, the passive-aggressive, civil, peaceful resistance is definitely going to change the Turkish society from its roots. It was not anti-democratic earlier, but it was non-democratic, I can say. So hopefully, in the near future, Turkish summer will give us some fruits. And as a last word, I would like to say something to those who have the intentions of assuming the role of Big Brother. Big Brother should beware of the little siblings, little brothers and little sisters, because they are mobile, they are unorganized, they are interconnected, they have this, they are recording everything, they are tweeting everything. And as a last sign, I would like to show you something that I got from the park. This is how I had to report, how I had to write from the park, as it was impossible to breathe. Although my eyes were burning a lot, I still had to wear this mask so that the gas did not reach my nose so much. That was all.
So I guess ultimately we've heard two dramatic stories from Turkey and Tunisia about violent protests and revolutions in public places where social media has helped people coordinate their resistance against an oppressive force. Of course, democratic governance of a society ultimately requires more than violent protests and revolution. And optimally, we would have legislators that take also responsibility for what concerns their people raise without them going to the streets and being subject to gas canisters. And I know that maybe two of our following speakers will address this issue and how you relate the social media and the internet to policy processes. But I will leave over the word to my colleague, Mr. Zalewski, so that he may introduce the remainder of the panel.
Thank you very much. We're all very much impressed about these two presentations, and I subscribe to what Amelia Andersdotter said. And it is very clear that sometimes revolution creates disillusion, and there is constant fight. There is a constant need to fight for democracy, to fight for right of expression, and for freedom. So in this continuous fight, in this continuous activity, social medias are extremely important. And referring to what you said, Amelia, I'd like to ask our colleagues from Poland, who are living in different conditions, different circumstances, also actively participated in fight for freedom, of course, in, I believe, other way. It was not a fight for direct, let's say, democracy or freedom of society, but it was a fight for the access to culture, what is very important right of every citizen. It was a fight for freedom of expression in internet, and it was also a fight for free internet, not over and controlled by even not states, but huge corporations. And turning to Madame Szymielewicz, I would like to ask you about the current dangers. How do you see the problems of freedom of internet today and in the future? And what is your recipe and what is your suggestion to us? What we should do to maintain free internet in democratic societies? What is not less complicated than in other circumstances? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, the task is so ambitious that I feel like leaving the room now. Before I answer your question, or I try to answer your questions, let me thank you in the first place that finally we take part in the panel on internet freedom, talking about revolutions with the actors from the actual revolutions. It's really not often that it happens in Europe and in Brussels. I've been to many panels which spoke about Arab Spring, not yet about Turkey, but this is still to come, without including your voices. And we heard so many times that it was Facebook revolution, and even if we attacked this kind of claims, we really missed your voice. So I'm really happy, and I really feel honored to share that floor with you, and thank you for whatever you said. I tried to do some tweeting, but I wasn't in the best position, so I hope others did it better than me. Also, listening to a colleague from Turkey, I only feel how lucky we are in Poland to have politicians who actually do listen, not only on Twitter, but in real political life, and police that refrain from violence. So yes, we are in a very luxurious situation, so we can discuss what is to be done next. Well, for me, thinking about internet freedom, obviously internet matters for freedom and vice versa, right? So internet can be a battlefield. It can trigger a lot of fight because people feel this is too important to give up. So if politicians come and they invent the laws that take our civic liberties, we will fight back. But on the other hand, well, this is a very important tool where we can exercise also our ability to revolt, as the stories, especially the second one, proved only too well. Polish experience, I think many of you are familiar with this, and I will not go back to that, especially that the question was more future forward-looking. But definitely what we fought for was exactly some kind of understanding of internet freedom, which was threatened by precise legislative action. And we did use the internet as a tool, but only as a tool. What you said, Mr. Zalewski, before, it's very important. We have to remember it's just a tool which can be used for both good and wrong. I really liked your little brother metaphor. Indeed, I often say that internet as technology has this fundamental disadvantage that it can be a perfect tool of surveillance. It can be. It has not been created as a freedom tool. It was created for military purposes, as many of you know, and it indeed allows politicians, secret services, corporations to trace everything we do online. So everything we do online leaves traces behind us. And this is a very powerful tool of surveillance. But on the other hand, of course, and I will not repeat your story because it was extremely vivid what you said and what you've shown to us, it can also be used in reverse. So really the big question is what Mr. Zalewski just asked, how we move towards the positive use. Well, I mean, I still believe in a legal regulation, and I still think that we as citizens, at least living in democratic states, we have probably not, I mean, our best bet is to bet on the law. That's why my foundation, Panoptykon Foundation, we often choose working through legislation and fighting for better legal safeguards and guarantees to help us preserve these freedom tools. But as we know, at least from the recent stories from the US and the secret services abusing their tools, law is not always going to work. We still need politicians, politicians in their diplomatic exchanges, we still need other safeguards. How to get there, I really don't know. I really hope that our audience is better equipped to discuss this later, and I do hope we will have time for this discussion, because we are all citizens, we all look for, it's a never-ending hunt for better tools, how to influence politics. And that brings me back to limitations of internet. Not only it can be used as a tool of surveillance, it can also be used against democracy. Social media are very easy to be manipulated. From Arab Spring, we had many reports by activists themselves that their message was manipulated, that the big media manipulated it, that there were fake pictures showing things that didn't happen. The same apparently happened in Turkey. We have to remember that social media is owned by corporations. By using them as our way to mobilize and connect, we entrust very sensitive information, political information, to corporations that can sell it, but they can also share it legally with secret services of the countries we want to fight with. So that's a very serious limitation, another one. We have also psychological limitation. What we often see is something I would term, or somebody also already termed, clicktivism. People just clicking, I joined the protest, and they do nothing more. They already think and they feel that they participate. They term themselves digital activists by doing nothing other than liking something. This is a danger, that we might have societies sitting on the couches and clicking and thinking that they are rebelling. That can be used also to keep people down. So this is another challenge we have to somehow face. And I don't know really how, apart from educating people and making them aware that this is not going to get us far. Finally, there is a big challenge of translating whatever we do online to real politics. ACTA was a perfect example of this for me. A lot happened online in Poland, but nothing would happen in Brussels if there were no translators like we try to do, translating the online claims into the language of mainstream media, into the language of European Parliament. You have to get out of internet if you want to influence, like people did in Tunisia, like people did in Turkey. It was people who risked their lives and their health that really mattered, not the clicks and not the movement online, right? So these are all challenges and limitations of the internet, which are not less important than the legal challenges I described, that we have to fight for better laws. We also have to fight for our own civic awareness. And I'm really the last person to know how to do this. I'm only doing my piece of land, so to say. and I think everybody should find their own answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very precise description of threats regarding present and future internet use, and just making us aware how it is easy to manipulate democracy by using internet. So it's very important for us to understand it and to counteract. Now I would like to turn to Mr. Jarosław Lipszyc, and also referring to this very formative experience which fight against ACTA was in Poland. I would like to ask the question, what is the lesson we learned that time, and in which more practical way do you think we can, in Europe, but not only in Europe, make internet more free?
Thank you. This is a tough question, and the problem is there is no easy answer. But I can share with you some of my experiences, and to do this, I probably need to get back as much as 20 years ago, because on November 1993, I actually got my first email address, and I first got in touch with the internet, and as a very formative experience, this was done illegally actually, because I was still a student of a secondary school, and the only place with the internet which you could use, where you can use internet, was the Warsaw University, and it was meant only for the students of the university. So a friend of mine who was a student bribed a server admin with a bottle of vodka, I suppose, to create a fake account for me so I could use an internet. So this feeling of doing something illegal is something which was from the very beginning connected to the internet. And the first time I used the internet was like, whoa, now I can touch with anyone in the world. I got my email address, so I can send emails, and there is IRC, Internet Relay Chat, so I can talk with people from all over the world in the real time, and there is a Gopher, which is like a database of articles, mainly scientific. That was it. I mean, there was no World Wide Web in that time. I mean, at least not on the Unix university machines. And when I have different point of view with Kasia, we cooperate with Kasia for a long time now. It's usually in a big way. So I think she made one mistake when she said that internet from the beginning was meant to be a tool for control and surveillance. Quite the opposite, I must say. It was not created as such a tool. It was being done such a tool, and the internet in the very beginning was a distributed network. It was a distributed infrastructure, distributed processing power, distributed communication tools, and of course in the beginning I had to use the university machines, but fast forward to 2003, I installed Linux, GNU Linux, being precise, on my machine at home, and now I have the machine I fully control, and I have tools which I fully control, my email server and so on. And fast forward 2013, and I lost it. My cell phone is not a universal logic machine. It's not a computer. I do not control it anymore. There is a company who controls it and which allows me to install the applications they approved. And the network as I use is hugely centralized, and we do know, because we do know, that the information sent over the network is being surveilled, and the information is being given away to others. And and there was a meeting with the Polish Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, where one of the older guys, Marek Hołyński, tried to explain our Prime Minister what the internet should look like. And he was telling him exactly this story. And Prime Minister told him, Mr. Hołyński, your internet is gone. And the problem is that Polish Prime Minister was right. So it was internet was designed to be a tool in the hands of the people, and to some degree it still is. And we can see how the democratic access to the communication tools, to use the Marxist language, to the means of production of information, is changing the equilibrium of power. But in the same time, we may not forget that we do not control the internet, and we do not control the tools, and this power, which is for now given for us, can be taken away, because the Twitter will work only as long as Twitter and, I mean, someone in that company will forward your messages to other people. So the change in the equilibrium of power, it was something which is, during the ACTA process, which was visible in a, I must say, also in a very funny way. I mean, the information on that ACTA was approved by a Polish government, broke on Thursday, and on Friday we started to share this information all around the web. And on Saturday and on Sunday, people really engaged. And when politicians get back to work on Monday, it was just too late to do anything, because politicians do not work on weekends. So, we could. That was funny, because they were really surprised. I mean, they just and the ACTA protests were actually meta protests. There were protests that we keep the control we do have, and that we do not lose just another part of our freedom. But the situation is not good, and I'm not known for being an optimist. Quite the opposite. We do not have a processing power anymore. The processing is done elsewhere. It's called the cloud, and we do not have control over infrastructure. In fact, we never was. And as a result, we are subject to control, surveillance, and censorship. And there is a hope. There is a hope. We can get our machines back, thanks to the free software movement, and Richard Stallman in particular, for their work. The free software is giving us the control over our machines back. The free infrastructure, free as in freedom, not free as in gratis, is more difficult because those who control the cables and those who control the radio frequencies, they are not going to disappear, and for many technical and legal reasons. And for now, we rely on a very fragile assumption that those who control the infrastructure will not use their control against us. But we already know that this is not true. We already know that that information about our communication is being given, for example, to governments, which is not necessarily a good thing, as our guests will tell us. And on the other level, services. We gave away control of our communication channels to companies such as Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook, Twitter, to name just the big five. And we do know that they use all the information we give them to maximize their revenues, to exercise business models which are not necessarily good for us. And and make no mistake, they are not here to protect our civic liberties. And we do know that those companies give away the information they have, because we gave this information them, to governments, which is not necessarily a good thing. And in fact, we do not need to use those services, but we do. And make no mistake, we are not customers of those companies. We are the product that those companies sell to others. And we do this because it's easier. We sold the freedom, we sold the control over our communication channels for a bunch of PHP scripts, because it's difficult to learn. They make it a little bit easier for us, and that's just enough to convince us that to give away our freedoms. And on top of that, we got laws which push us to give away our freedom. We get, last but not least, the copyright, which makes sure that every act of communication with other will be a transaction which is paid for, but which is also recorded. So, internet may be a tool of freedom, but it is a tool of oppression, and I think we need to start not only protest or to defend, but also to actually build tools for free communication on the level of services, on the level of machines, and most difficult of all, on the level of communication infrastructure. Thank you.
Mr. Minister, thank you very much for sharing with us your ideas, your views, and I think that they are very valuable because, first of all, they make us aware that Internet is just a public area. And it is very important because it should belong to us, and we shouldn't be a subject to companies who provide us with infrastructure or with technology. Public area should belong to us. And therefore, it should be framed in the way that, for example, culture is not a trade, is not a transaction, it's a value. We should have free access to culture. Information is a value. It's not just a matter of trade. And I believe that you are right, that we should think over again the Internet zone and to just warrant reversing it, retransferring it into the public. Because otherwise, you are right, I believe that you would become more dependent on those who control infrastructure, who control technology, and it is completely against the human right to communicate, to share information, to share experiences, emotions. So thank you very much for that. And I would like to pass the floor to Amelia, and we should start the debate among us.
So, thank you for these words. And I think it's very interesting that you make a difference between a value for society and the governance of society and the transaction as a basis for society. I'm still positive, and I think that there can be a change, and that it's not like it's an irrevocable change that just removed all of the power from society and I will never get it back. And I agree with Kasia that the Internet needs to be regulated, but of course we need to regulate it right and in accordance with the values that we want to prevail there. So this is the big challenges that we're facing, I guess, in Europe also. What values do we want to enshrine in our laws? Do we have values that we want to enshrine in our laws? And how do we make them apply on the Internet in a way that everyone agrees with the social, economical contract there? We had planned for there to be a questions and answering session from the audiences. So if there's anyone here who would like to raise an issue or a question or a commentary on any of the panelists' presentations, you can raise your hands and I will try to catch you. There's one gentleman at the back. And if you could please introduce yourself just briefly before you speak also.
So I'm Cash. I'm a parrot from Belgium, from Brussels exactly. And I would like to know how can the European institution protect citizens from such action spotted by PRISM and what other country can do on the territory of Europe. Thanks.
Well, I can try and start answering, and then maybe you will add more. It's a tricky thing because, well, we would need in the first place a country strong enough to negotiate with the biggest, still I think the biggest economic power, which is US. I mean, that is a diplomatic issue. No matter what guarantees we place in European law, these companies that we think of, the American companies, will always be bound by their national laws. So, as you probably know, the practices like PRISM, they are grounded in US law. The law which was adopted by democratically elected Congress 10 years ago and then amended under Obama, who promised not to do this, but he did it. And they officially have a law which obliges all the companies that are under US jurisdiction to reveal our data, our meaning foreigners' data. Our data are not protected. So this is a situation where, in the light of the law, the companies have to cooperate. No matter what Poland, Belgium, EU legislates against it, the company will always have a dilemma, who to listen. So it will have two conflicting legal orders, and its lawyers will have a big headache. So we will only have to trust that the company chooses the right legal order, which is ours, and will refuse to cooperate under US legal order, but knowing the benefits they receive from that legislation, it's quite unlikely. So the only way forward really is to make a diplomatic agreement, is to negotiate, and here Mr. Zalewski can probably tell you more about current negotiations going on between EU and US. From what I know, there is a treaty on the table, not the TTIP treaty, but the treaty on law enforcement, on exchange of data, of personal data for law enforcement between EU and US, but nobody is moving, nobody is pushing EU and US to finalize it. But the chance of entering into such a treaty exists. Maybe MEPs will tell us more how it looks like from legislation.
Well, I mean, my analysis would be more optimistic than just a kind of long diplomatic discussion. Obviously, companies that don't follow European laws on the protection of personal data of European individuals should be fined. And so if I understand American legislation, they don't really have tools for fining companies in secret that do not follow, for instance, the Federal Information Security Act, it's called, right? Oh, so then we need to fine them more in Europe for not protecting personal data than the American government can find them under FISA, because actually companies ultimately are very, very simple. They have a profit incentive that they need to follow, and they will do that which is cheapest for them. And so we need to make it the cheapest and easiest option for the companies to uphold our fundamental rights. I mean, it's not a terribly difficult political problem, really, but it's difficult to get it politically executed. Because, of course, from the company's perspective, this becomes a difference of who punishes them worst. And so a company, of course, is not so interested in being punished to begin with. So that is more the dilemma that we're facing here.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree with you. And we have to understand that the main problem is that such firms like Google operate in Europe and offer their services to Europeans, and definitely they have to comply with European law. However, the place of collecting data are not under European control. They are elsewhere. And that is a problem. But it depends on us. I can imagine the situation when European law defines that the firm But we have to discuss it because it has some negative effects as well. We can and that is just an open question. I see also the negative issues, but we can discuss the situation when the servers of firms serving Europeans are under European sovereignty. I mean, they are located in the European Union. Then we have a tool, a practical tool, to control. But of course, that is just the question mark. Definitely what we have to do is to make these firms just accomplish to our regulations.
Do we have other questions or more questions or comments? One from the lady with the blue scarf.
Thank you very much. I'm Emily from the Euromed Human Rights Network. And first of all, I would like to thank you very much for all of you for your very insightful comments and experience. I was actually wondering, as you may know, the EU, following the so-called Arab Spring, adopted a new policy stating very clearly more support to human rights, more support to independent civil society. So I was wondering, what is your opinion regarding the concrete translation of this policy today on the ground? And especially, you raised and you mentioned many cases of repression of freedom of expression in Tunisia, but also in Turkey. So I was wondering if today maybe you have any concrete ideas of how the EU could support you even more, and of course especially the European Parliament.
Well, thank you very much for this question. It's very important. Well, I think that the European Union can support us by supporting people, by supporting citizens, activists, and not the regimes. In the past, the European Union supported the dictator in Tunisia. They believed his lies, and I think that today the same is happening. Unfortunately, as I said, now people in power has the tools, the money, and the power to spread their propaganda, to have a double discourse, a discourse in Tunisia and another discourse outside Tunisia. You have to check for reality, to find reality, and not just to accept what they are saying. You have to stand by the people, not to stand with the governments and support them in launching a new dictatorship in Tunisia. So I think that people should listen to, European government should listen to people again.
Okay. So I would also like to comment on the European Union's effect on Turkish democratization process. In the last 10 years, it was only more than 10 years actually, since 1999, when Turkey started to officially begin applying for the full membership of the European Union. It was only since then that we have seen actual increase in the liberties in the society. So throughout the decade, thanks to the government's reform packages, civil society has been sustained to a certain place. And apart from that, in the last 20 days, during these Gezi Park incidents, when there was extreme violence, people have started using these liberties that they have learned in the last decade to show their sign of protest. Perhaps if it happened before, people would have responded in a more violent manner. But because they have seen that they have rights and that they can use it, and if they, as long as they keep peaceful, they can actually make some change in the system. Because of this, it was thanks to EU and the Europeanization process that Turkish civil society today is actually experiencing a liberalization of democracy as state structure, and the European leaders and European Union condemning and defying the violence applied towards non-violent peaceful protesters. They have shown great support to Turkish civil society, and their support has been welcomed greatly by the Turkish peaceful protesters. And moreover, especially the people of Gezi Park and Taksim Square are grateful to Claudia Ruth and her presence there, which brought the international coverage to a much higher level, I guess. So European reaction to these events has created a much larger solidarity nationally in Turkey, and it has given people hope that this can result in positive change.
If I may also try to say 2 words about the possibility the EU has to influence positively the situation. I will concentrate on Tunisia, not on Turkey, because these countries are in completely different situation. I believe that in Turkey there is the political infrastructure, who even if today is not sufficient to solve the conflict, definitely not, it will be used by the protesters to do it. But in terms of Tunisia, I was in Tunisia 2.5, 3 months after the revolution, and I've talked to the leaders of the movement, talked to the representatives of the new government, and my impression at the time was, and it's still valid, that we should use our soft power wiser and better. By soft power, I mean the access to European market. It is a very important economic tool, which should be in parallel followed by liberalization and democratization in much more European style. That time in Northern Africa, definitely Tunisia was the most liberalized society, and the country which is the most sensitive to European not only way of life but also values. So we could stimulate progress in this direction by broader opening. But of course, on the other hand, when we have a crisis in Europe, it requires more bravery, we have to be more open and more convincing European Union citizens that it is in our interest. And unfortunately today, when Europe in some way rather prefers to close itself than to open to the others, we have no positive climate. But it depends on us. We have to mobilize public opinion. We have to show in which way the processes in Europe and in Tunisia and other Northern African countries are interconnected. Just to suggest and just to promote more opening in our relations. So that is something what is important.
We will have the time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. So if there's anyone who's still looking to make a comment, and there is on the first floor.
Thank you. My name is Atul Awasthi, and I'm from a telecom company here in Belgium. And I can tell you that we do apply the European data regulation policy, so that's very important, and we do get trainings. Being said that, I think I'm by profession as an engineer, I'm skilled as an engineer, and with all of the examples here, strongly supporting that internet is used as a tool, and it's probably going in a different direction, maybe because of the usage and because of the commercial reasons and decentralizations and so on. Shouldn't we think of also, while we are engaged in the policy creation by the European Parliament and with the diplomacy between the countries, should we also look forward, because I think as an engineer and like some more like a technology solution, because I remember also when I studied in college that there were different technology used in America and in Europe, and different protocols have been used. And I think we do a lot of programs in microbiology and other nuclear collaboration to come up with what is best for as a European land compared to the rest of the world.
We have a lot of European cooperation projects also in the ICT sector, but I guess there is a discrepancy between the work that we do here in the Union and ultimately what market forces are responsible for creating our laws. And so I find often when I deal with online services regulation or copyright law or even things like trademark law and architectures for public services, that we are not really thinking about the values that we want in these structures that are so very important for society to work. And we think a lot more about what sales pitches come in from different places of actually normally the American economy, because they do a lot of industrial steering also. We're just only seeing it here in the form of sales pitches. And so I think it would be useful for politicians in all of the member states and in Brussels to think about the values that they want to promote and have. And I could easily reiterate the point that it's not like the internet needs to be an unregulated place. That is clearly not the case, but we need to regulate it right. It's not about no regulation, it's about having the right regulation, and that's why it's important that we're able to deal with these value issues of freedom of speech, the right to privacy, access to culture, no access to culture, power balances, data retention, no data retention. And we're struggling a bit, but again, there's definitely hope. It is an ongoing political discussion. They can often be slow. Society doesn't change in an instant. And so I have to believe, because my expected lifespan is 82 years and I'm only 25, that we will reach some kind of conclusion on this, because otherwise I will live with the consequences for a long time. So I'm hopeful.
I'm 38 and my life expectancy is 76 or something like that. So I'm being more pessimistic. But we get to the point where internet is not like roads anymore. It's more like water. It's critical infrastructure of the society, and by critical I mean we rely on this infrastructure for basically every single task we can imagine. It's hard to imagine going for a coffee without this infrastructure, because we need to make an appointment and then we need to pay with our credit card, and this payment also gets through the internet, right? So this is the critical infrastructure. So, and I fully agree that such a critical infrastructure needs policing. It's not something we can leave just to market forces, because its importance for for its importance for all other areas of life, including business, and like huge business, basically all business, is just too big to risk the losing this infrastructure or being underdeveloped. So I think we do need a stronger look into this, and but in the same time we need to immune ourselves from the lobbying. I mean, it's as of every critical infrastructure, there is just a lot of money to be made on it in different ways, and not only, I mean, internet service providers and different services, and selling audio, video, signal, and so on and so on and so on. There is a lot of lobbying happening, and the problem is that citizens do not have money for lobbying. They have only elected representatives and a bunch of enthusiasts working in non-government sector. That's it. There is very few of those people. I would say all is in the hands of politicians.
That's a big responsibility to put in the hands of us. But maybe we'll try to, as much as we can. Do we have any final remarks from anyone? We have. Are you both addressing questions? Because otherwise you can maybe both actually speak. And Edmund first, and then the gentleman in black.
Thank you. Just, I guess, two quick questions. Very interesting discussion, especially on the, regulating the internet, and then, we all know that there's some regulation needed, and especially we talked about privacy earlier on, and there's always this, I guess, dichotomy between privacy and security, and a lot of people, including PRISM and those type of issues, a lot of the, I guess, quote unquote, perpetrators of those or justification for those systems is to actually provide the benefit to people of security. I guess the question is where do we draw the line, and what do we tell those people who keep saying that this is for the security of the people, that we need to somewhat invade partially the privacy? And then I'm interested, the second quick question is interested in the gentleman talking about, I guess, the people taking back the infrastructure. Very interesting idea. I understand the open source software and those type of things, but how do we take back the cables and communication networks? That would be kind of interesting. So, yes, a couple of quick questions and observations.
I'm afraid it's not a quick question and not a quick answer. Well, I mean, obviously this is probably the biggest tension, I mean, one more pessimistic, optimistic voice on my side to the politicians. I mean, I don't think, as opposed to Jarek, that we can ignore lobbyists. I mean, politicians can never ignore lobbyists. We are also lobbyists. It's the same game. So some lobbyists come and they claim security is important. Some lobbyists come, and we are included in that group, and they say privacy or freedom counts. And basically both are right to some extent. I mean, neither of these values should be absolute. The one thing we have to remember is that freedom does not balance with security. So at least not in my constitution, you don't find something like, people's freedom or dignity should be limited because of security as such. You can have some vital interests like public security, like even public finance, but we should always fight to have both, right? If we agree on this